Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast. This is where accounting professionals just like you come to learn the most efficient and powerful ways to grow their firm, sharpen their sales skills, and have consistent increasing revenue. We cover topics from sales, networking, handling objections, negotiation, pricing, finding those ideal clients, and how to get rid of the ones that just don't suit you and how to set those boundaries so you can stop giving away your time, working for free, putting yourself on sale, and really start to get paid for the value and the worth that you bring to your clients. You'll learn tips, strategies, as well as hear others from personal interviews from successful accounting professionals. This podcast will show you exactly how to create the firm and life of your dreams full of abundance. Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. Our special guest is an expert on determining reasonable compensation for closely held business owners. He's educated more than 100,000 financial professionals on this topic and has been published in numerous national and state journals. When he's not in the office, he enjoys spending time with his wife and his chocolate lab, hiking Colorado backcountry, and paddling its scenic lakes and rivers. But before we welcome our special guest to the show, I know that everyone is telling you the best way to increase your firm revenue is to work harder or get as many clients as possible or discount your fees just to get a client in the door so then you can charge them more in the future. But to be honest, that only works if you want to increase your firm revenue at a snail's pace and end up totally burnt out, resenting your work. Here at the Abundant Accountant, I teach a far simpler method to firm owners that allows you to charge premium fees, double your firm revenue, get paid first and upfront, and never have accounts receivable, all while reducing your workload and loving the work that you do. If you want to see how I've coached my clients to do this, register for my free masterclass at theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. It's an investment of 20 minutes right now to change the financial future of your firm forever. So once again, head on over to theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. And now let's welcome our special guest, Paul, to the show. Welcome, Paul, to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michelle. I've been looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for being here with us today on the Abundant Accountant Podcast. And before we dive in today, Paul, if you could just share with everyone who you are and what you do. I've already done your intro, but I always think it's more powerful to come directly from you.
So my name is Paul Hamann, and I am the founder of a company called RCReports, and our software will determine reasonable compensation for closely held business owners. And we built this product specifically for the accounting industry.
Wonderful. And when you're not working, what do you enjoy doing? Because I know that, you're not always working 24/7.
So I'd like to believe that. I think my mind tends to stay on duty longer than my body does. But I live in Colorado, and I really do enjoy the high country here. And I have a chocolate lab. He's in the office with me right now. And typically, if I get some time away, I like to go on a hike with him. I also very much enjoy kayaking and canoeing rivers in Colorado. Sometimes I'll take Remy, but a lot of times I won't. Sometimes he just wants to go for an impromptu swim, which is great for him, not always great for me.
I know that's like a mess, right? Having a wet dog shake all over you.
So getting him back in the canoe is always fun too.
Right? Yeah. It's like, how do you shoulder press a chocolate lab into a canoe while swimming? But that's awesome. So I know here we're talking about, what you do with your reasonable comp software and how a firm owner can leverage having access to that, knowing the knowledge, and how they can increase their revenue by doing tax planning or reasonable comp analysis or different tax planning strategies. And I'd love it if you could share, what are some of the biggest maybe mistakes that you've seen firm owners not do correctly in this space, and how what you teach and what you have can really solve that for them. I think talking about some of the biggest mistakes or misconceptions might be a great way to start.
Sure. I think probably the biggest mistake accounting firm owners make, and specifically on the topic of reasonable compensation, is just simply ignoring it, pretending it's not there, or glancing over it quickly with their clients. It is a foundational piece and a foundational conversation that they should have with any of their SMBs, not only just from a service standpoint, but the doors and opportunities it can open for accountants if they are building a practice beyond the tax prep hamster wheel.
Yeah,
It's
we're
a
definitely
great,
not talking about the tax prep hamster wheel. We're
right,
talking about, firm owners who want to double revenue, triple revenue, work less hours, and have a life again. Instead of
yeah,
being on that hamster wheel and saying every year, I'd never want to do a tax season like that again. So I guess it
perfect.
would be great to hear, if you have a case study and you can walk us through, someone who did ignore the reasonable comp, didn't think it was a big deal, and maybe some of the consequences they had to face, but then how they shifted their firm. And if we can walk through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you
So,
can make up the name of the firm owner. You don't have to say the real name if you don't want to.
the era I grew up in, it was all about Acme, so we'll do Acme accounting.
Okay.
But uh, when if you overlook reasonable comp and you are working with a number of SMBs, there's a few places that your clients may come back and want to have a conversation with you about why didn't you. One is compliance, and I'm happy to talk more about that if you want, but that's more if the IRS comes knocking and now you find yourself in a difficult position to defend a reasonable comp number that doesn't have any basis in reality. And that kind of falls into the risk bucket. But in the building a profitable and enjoyable practice where reasonable compensation can come in is when you're, my favorite place is when you're onboarding the new client, right? Doing a reasonable comp study on them and then talking with them about their firm, it opens up so many conversations. And first and foremost, one is entity planning. And SMB comes to you depending on what their current entity structure is. Reasonable comp report will give you the information you need to start having conversations about whether they should become an S corp, whether they're not ready to become an S corp, or if they are an S corp, maybe they shouldn't be.
Yeah,
But that is a foundational piece of having that conversation.
it is. And what have you seen some of your firm owner clients who've used your software or whatever, any tool that they've used? What have you seen that someone has been able to enroll a client and start with that piece when onboarding a new client and doing the entity planning and doing a reasonable comp survey on that client? What have you seen them charge a client for these types of services? What ranges?
Yeah, so there's a few different pricing models I've seen be very successful. When onboarding a client, sometimes it's the wow factor. We did this analysis, and here's where we see that you can take some positive steps in your company through entity planning and other things. Those engagements, just the one-time analysis, generally start at about $1,000, but $2,000 to $2,500 is pretty typical. And that would include the reasonable comp report, but it'll also include an entity analysis and some other advice and analysis along those lines as far as kind of the importing, the onboarding, or even kind of the sales and marketing of that new client.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's a great, segue into doing more in-depth tax planning and other opportunities for, be it whatever they can see with that client, but going more on that advisory route versus being stuck on that hamster wheel. How else have you seen firm owners? And if you have, I think you said, as Acme, if you can walk us through that process and, if you've seen some pretty big mistakes, and I know that there are risks associated with it, and maybe we can talk about some of those big ones that maybe, someone listening today hasn't even thought of and said, this should be a priority in my firm anytime working with a small business client.
Absolutely. So the two risks that I commonly see, I already mentioned one of them, which is that the IRS comes knocking and you don't have a defensible position for your reasonable comp report. The client's going to have a conversation with you, a very candid conversation with you about why didn't you talk to me about this? They are I have seen the business owners throw the accountant under the bus on this when they're talking with the IRS. Hey, IRS, my accountant never talked to me about this. I didn't know that this is something I should have done or should have paid more attention to, something along those lines. So that's when it comes into risk to the accountant and to the accounting firm. And the IRS has also imposed preparer penalties when reasonable
Mhm.
comp has been challenged by the IRS. So
What do
there's
those
multiple
penalties run about?
up to $5,000. The ones that I have firsthand knowledge of, one was
Yeah.
49,4950. So, and the other one was exactly five. So right about 5 grand. And so that gets expensive real quick, especially when they realize that you're doing the same thing with all your clients. Then we tend to see that contagion kind of run through the book of business. And those of you who have listened or know Eric Green,
Yes.
he's had that happen specifically to one of his clients. Total penalties on that case, I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. I think I want to say about $30,000
Yeah.
just in single $5,000 penalties to one CPA.
And there are ways to prevent it. I think that's why we're here talking about not only the importance of it, but also this is a revenue stream. This is another way to show your knowledge, show your value, and prepare a new client for success and be able to charge even more than you do, maybe even on tax returns or any of the compliance work or accounting services that you would do as a not only courtesy, but also help them set them up to reduce their tax liability to the IRS.
Absolutely. And that's where I really see the value of reasonable comp planning come in, right? One, making sure they're on the right entity source or right entity for their business. But when you're looking at this from your practice standpoint, it is a fantastic revenue stream from multiple areas. The first one, there's a few different ones, but one
Okay.
of the first ones I think of is most people typically have an 1120S package, right? Simply adding the cost of that report in there and requiring it for all your clients, that's on the low end should be in the $400 and $500 range. It's a compliance requirement moving forward with the IRS, especially with its funding. All of your 1120S packages have now increased by that amount. So that's one way I see it built into the practice. But another way is when you do run these reports, they're very detailed. And so those of you that may be doing fractional CFO or offering payroll or other services, that will come out in the report. And that gives you a natural segue to have those conversations. Look, you're spending 11 or 15% or whatever amount of time it is in bookkeeping. And it's not something that is a good use of your time because you're already busy. We can offer that service to you. We can take it off your plate. And you've now built in a reoccurring revenue stream on payroll for your firm.
How much revenue have you seen some of the firm owners generate just from that recurring revenue?
Well, there's so many different buckets they can put it in, but it starts with the initial planning, right? So that piece, like I said, is easily a few $1,000s. Beyond that, depending on what level of payroll service you're offering, are you offering an A to Z? Are you coming in and working remotely on their QuickBooks file? Whatever amount you want to put in there, but that's part of our planning tool. You can build all that into your initial model and get a sign off from your client
Mm.
on that, as well as whatever you want to charge for your annual 1120S. So when you're talking about reoccurring revenue, when you're doing entity planning, you can build into a proposal for the client's approval or not. Items like payroll, 1120S if they're not already a corporation, and anything else that you want to build in. But you can easily take a new SMB and build them into probably a $2,500 to $5,000 reoccurring revenue client per month.
Okay. And when you see that happening, and for anyone interested who wants to, you know, talk to Paul and see how he does this, that is not my wheelhouse, but I am all about increasing the revenue. So this sounds like a great idea. And I'm also all about not having you have penalties and doing things the right way in your firm. They can do a demo of this, correct with you?
Yes, correct. So we describe ourselves as an education first company, and we do a tremendous amount of education. But the best way to see the software in action is just to jump onto our website at rcreports.com. You'll find a demo button there without any trouble, and just book a quick 30-minute demo with somebody on our staff. They'll walk you through the platform and give you a really good inside view of only how to use the software, but how to build that software and use it to build your
In the
advisory
firm.
firm. Yeah.
Hmm. Perfect. And if you mention the Abundant Accountant podcast, they're also going to give you a little bit of a discount off the services if you purchase
Absolutely.
them.
You definitely want to mention this podcast, and all the folks there know, and they will be able to give you that discount on
Okay,
the spot.
great. So, what have you seen, Paul, as far as an ROI from most of the firm owners? If we can get back into an exact case study, that would be great. If you could walk us through the whole process, what they were doing before, if they had penalties, they invested in your software, they generated X amount of revenue. If you could walk through some of these details on one specific firm, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So I'm thinking of a firm out of the Midwest that implemented this,
Okay.
and we've seen it implemented in a few different ways. One is all at once. In other words, as of this date, everybody in our book of business and anybody coming in our book of business that's an SMB, we're going to do reasonable comp analysis on them, whether they're an S corp or not. And then the other way is they feather it in over typically a 3-year period. So either way, you're going to end up with this at the same revenue. It's just whether you're going to get it in the first year or 3 years.
So, what happened with the Midwest firm? How did
So
they
the
implement all at once?
Midwest firm, yeah, they did the rip off the Band-Aid. They're like, we're doing it all this year.
Okay. And how
Um,
many clients did they have?
so they're a pretty good sized firm for some of the smaller firms. I want to say they had I want to say 6 or 8 users in our system. And so all of those users had a book of business. Some were uh, working with SMBs, though others, a lot of SMBs, others weren't. But their return on investment was over 6,000% that year,
Wow.
which means that our software cost for the product they were using is $1,500 a year.
Wow.
So multiply that by your 6,000% return. That's what their return on investment was that year by starting with that reasonable comp analysis and then building other products on.
So that's a significant amount of revenue, but I think what's more important is that everyone, I mean, I guess, had the entity planning, they had the reasonable comp analysis complete, and the client felt more valued, more supported, and like the firm was actually taking a proactive approach.
Yes, correct. So it was a win-win-win, right? So the client now has a defensible position. They're likely
Mhm.
saving either time and or money that they can put back into their business. Somebody else is doing their payroll. They're now an S corp, so they're saving some money on payroll taxes. And
Yeah.
the firm has a steady stream of reoccurring revenue, whether that's payroll services, fractional CFO services. Those are two of the most popular. We've also added 1120Ss. I think most tax preparers would rather do an 1120S than a 1040, but I'm just guessing.
I would imagine so. At least that's what I've heard from my clients, but I don't really know what all those terminologies mean. I just know about the top line revenue. So in total, I know you said it was 6,000% ROI. So what was the total revenue they generated just by making this switch and ripping the Band-Aid off and going all in for, their book of business on the 6 to 8 users that they had?
Yeah, so they estimated that making that switch over brought in additional somewhere between 75K and 100K into the firm that year.
Okay. Perfect. And that was just additional revenue by adding this on and having everything backed up in case there was anything from the IRS site come knocking. They have all the documentation in
Yep.
line. Is
Yes,
there
correct.
anything else that you learned from this case study with the Midwest firm that you'd like to share with some of the firm owners today about any other, risk mitigation that this helped with them with, not only increasing the revenue and doing the payroll and a few other things, but also some of the perks that they didn't even know were possible, some of those hidden things.
Yeah, I would say the thing I've heard more surprisingly more than anything else, and I heard it from this Midwest firm as well, is that the clients that cause you the most headache and put you as a preparer at the highest risk,
Yeah.
when they implement this, those clients left. They became somebody else's problem. And what a psychic relief that was, not to have the clients that eat up a lot of your time and don't produce the revenue that you need for your firm. Move on and find somebody that better matches who they really need as a preparer.
Yeah, we've
So
talked a lot about those clients, the pain in the ass clients. And if they're not willing to invest and do the right thing, they're on the see you later program. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. But I think the mental clarity and the freedom and the space to onboard new clients that are ready to follow your process in the firm is exactly what every single person here wants. And I know that. I think everyone's sick of the clients that are trying to run the show, get their documentation into you late, ask you for emergency stuff. Hey, this is important. I need my returns done yesterday. How come this is late, etc. But yet the client's the person who's leading the pack on the lateness of everything.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I had just seen probably within a half hour of you and I getting on this call, it was just kind of a random email string that I was copied on, where somebody was frustrated because their clients didn't want to do a reasonable comp report. And I'm like, I don't understand. Why are you giving them the option? You're the professional. You wouldn't ask them. You wouldn't tell them how to do their job. I don't understand why accountants ask their clients how they should do their job.
Well,
That's
I
always
think that
been
would be really
baffling to
fun
me.
to talk about, Paul. What would a firm owner say, or what do you educate your firm owners that haven't done this? They haven't done, any entity planning. They haven't done a reasonable comp analysis, and they've just been getting away with it and just going with the flow because they've been so busy. How does one present that to their current client and say, hey, I haven't been doing this. We need to do this. It's really important. We need to mitigate the risk in case of an audit or whatever it may be. What are the ways that you've been educating the firm owners that are maybe listening? They're like, oh, I should have done this, but I haven't been.
So a lot of it is what you just mentioned, which is really just having that conversation with the client. I think that it's paramount that the accountant and the client have mutual respect for one another. So as that trusted advisor, and that term's been used a lot and for really good reason.
Yeah.
If you come to your client and say, look, we haven't been doing this, but we need to, and here's why, that client should be saying, yeah, let's do that. And then if you can show additional value while doing that by showing that, hey, look, you're already stretched thin. How about we take payroll off? It's a win-win for both of you.
Yep.
It's the conversations that don't seem to embrace or have that respect built in. Those are the ones that it sounds like you've talked about quite a bit, right? Why are we continuing to work with them? They're not taking my advice, and not only are they putting themselves at risk, now they're putting me at risk because I have prepare penalties that could be headed my way, and also I don't want that reputation.
So true. Well, Paul, thank you so much for sharing all this. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you think might be important from the Midwest firm case study, or just any other red flags that maybe a firm owner is not seeing right now on really why they need to implement this, especially for those who are focusing on the small business owners?
I would leave you with this, that reasonable comp had been something that had kind of been a back burner thing for a while, and it is not any longer. And it's such a foundational piece of any conversation with a small business owner, that getting that conversation rolling and bringing it in as part of your tools or your tech stack, et cetera, it is eye-opening. It's a value-add services that other firms may not be offering, but I've yet to see it be a win-win and help build that firm out. Yeah. And so I would say take a few minutes, jump on a quick demo. We also do a tremendous amount of other education in the area. If you'd like to jump on some of that, we're happy to have you on those as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for being here with us today on the Abundant Accountant podcast. I think it is the no-brainer, and I think it should be part of just the way you operate your firm, because it also is a good, cover your type situation on your own part, and making sure that you're following everything to have documentation for the IRS and have your clients set up for the most success. So thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. Very much enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you all so much for joining me on another amazing episode of the Abundant Accountant podcast. And I know that everyone might be telling you the best way to increase your revenue is just to work harder or go get more clients or discount your fees and, just volume, volume, volume. But that only works if you want to increase your firm revenue at a snail's pace and end up burnt out and resenting the work you do. At the Abundant Accountant, I teach a very simpler method for firm owners that allows you to charge premium fees, double your annual revenue, get paid first and upfront, and never have AR ever again, while reducing your workload and getting your life back. And if you want to see how my clients are doing this, you can register for my free masterclass over at theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass. It's an investment of 20 minutes of your time that will change the financial future of your firm forever. So once again, head on over to theabundantaccountant.com/masterclass, and I look forward to seeing you there.